Hello guys, I'm Adam and this is Go-To Coders. Today we're going to be talking about getting promoted in a startup. Let's get started. Alright, so there are actually, I like to think about it, two major categories for getting promoted. One is getting promoted in a smaller company. This could be a company that's, less than 50 people, a new company that's maybe only been around 2 to 3 years. And then on the flip side, it's being promoted in a large company like Amazon, for example. This video is focused on startups. Some of these principles do carry over, but this is very specific to my experiences on getting promoted in a startup. In the startups I've worked in, I found that there are several key things, and I'm going to talk about those here in a second, that you need to focus on. And then on top of it, you need to remember these things so that you can tell your story at the end, which I'll get into in a bit. So the first thing is, number one, to a startup, your value is so important because you are one of maybe 10 people. Like I was employee number 7 at a company that ended up growing to 70 or 80 people at a certain point. And my value when there were 7 people was extremely high. Even though I was a fresh, college graduate, getting into a company, working as an intern, my value was high because I worked incredibly hard. I actually spanned large parts of our product. I was able to work in many different things. So that allowed me to advance very quickly because I proved my value day in and day out at that company. And I was given all the opportunity in the world to do that. Startups are awesome for this because if you can actually jump in and show that you are diverse, that you can actually do a bunch of different things, and that you can do a good job at all of them, it's going to lead to being recognized for, moving up the ladder and being given even more responsibility. That's the important thing. Being promoted isn't just making more money, it's actually being given more responsibility. Second thing is time. Also important in a startup is you can't expect it to be overnight. You may be, for example, a 1 year into your career programmer, and you may feel like you're doing the work of a senior developer. That is not the way it works in a startup. You need to still put in your time. And I'm telling you this because some startups make the mistake of actually promoting too quickly. On the flip side of that, you as a programmer need to make sure that you feel like you have done the time. And by time, this is so important. If you were to leave the company you're in now and go to a different company, would you still qualify as that mid-level dev? Would you still qualify as that senior dev or that principal dev? That is very important because there is a minimum amount of time that you just need to learn from experience at any company. So make sure you have the time in, make sure you've added value that entire time that you've been in the company, and then we'll move on to the third. The entire time you're going to be building a story. And there are some large companies, which I'll talk about in my next video, that takes us to a step further. But basically what you want to do is everybody's going to be running around like crazy, right? Everyone has got a million things going on, and no one's going to remember what you did 3 months ago or 4 months ago. So what you need to do is think about things like everything that I'm doing along my path, I'm building a story around it. And I would actually even recommend you actually take notes on this because you probably will forget some things that you did months ago. What is a big problem that you solved? Where is it you went above and beyond? Where is it you helped mentor a new programmer? Where is it you built this really cool system that ended up working really well? Make your story. And your story could be anything from the things that I detailed to maybe, an issue came in with one of our products that we were working on, and I had to work through the night to solve that. Those things you need to keep track of. And that leads us into the final thing, which is some event. So an event, I like to think about it as like a product is released, potentially a anniversary. So for example, say you've worked at a company for 2 years now, or some large thing that has happened that just feels like the right time. Like it's the right time for you to go bring up. Because I'm going to tell you right now, startups are not the best at helping developers move up the career ladder. So a lot of times, in my experience, in the time that I've spent at the several startups I've been at, it's up to you to go say, hey, I'm open to doing more responsibility. Is there a way that I could get promoted to senior developer? And maybe these are the things that I can do. Now, how do you convince them? You convince them with your story. You bring in and say, here's the value that I've added. Here's the time that I've put in. And here are the major things that I've accomplished in this company. And you go in very, very prepared to make that argument for yourself at some event that feels right to you. Now, that event, honestly, is sometimes the hardest thing to judge because there are just a million things going on in a startup. So the one that I would highly recommend you is on your anniversary. Most startups, most that I have been with, do have a yearly review. Although I will say some of the startups I've been at have actually claimed to have yearly reviews, but those rarely get done. I would actually take some time with your direct manager, and in the case of a really small company, the owner of the company, and plan an hour time, if possible an hour time. And you can always leave early if you're done, but basically go in there with a story that you've generated, detailing out everything that you've accomplished for the company. Now, there's one thing to be said, is you need to go in there knowing what you want, right? You also need to walk in there and I want to be a senior developer. These are the things I can bring to that role. Here's the vision that I've got for that. Here are some things that I've done. You don't want to go out there and just sit there and regurgitate everything you've accomplished the last 3 years. You need to maximize it for the things that are the most important, but also have more in case there are some pushbacks that come back. Finally, I will say the promotion is something that a lot of us as engineers really are striving for. We're all competitive. We want to move up the ladder. We want to actually do more. We want to do more work. We want to make more money because at the end of the day, that's why we work, right? To make more money. So with that said, what you want to do in that is go in knowing what kind of raise you want, knowing what promotion you want, and just being very transparent. You need to go in there and say, hey, I would like to be made a senior developer. I would like a 15% raise to accompany that. Here are the things that I believe I can bring to the senior developer role. And here are the reasons why I should be a senior developer. I put in 2 years where I've added a ton of value. The value that I've added is by doing X, Y, Z. And that's going to go a long way. Every time that I've used this strategy, it has worked incredibly well. Because, like I said, it is super easy for a developer to just be amazing, but be left behind in the career rush, especially when they're hiring, one of the startups I worked in, they were hiring developers from out of the state. They were bringing them in, and they were bringing them in for larger salaries than myself, and I was carrying a lot of the weight for a lot of those developers. So I went there very professionally, and I said, I believe I should be made a senior developer. And in that case, it was going to be a team lead. Here are the reasons why, and here's the amount of money that I would like to make to compensate myself for that. And here are the things that I've done, to name a few, to do that. I would highly recommend today you start journaling everything major that you accomplish in your career so that you can start building your story so that when the time comes for you to make an argument for yourself to get promoted, that can happen. Now, the whole thing changes a bunch when you go into a bigger company, which we will talk about again in the next video. But hopefully this helps those of you that are in startups or looking to get into startups. And until next time, everyone, keep coding.